baby. Oh, baby. YouTube, what is going on, everybody? Man. Oh, excuse me. Hold on. Let me get my light on real quick. You can't see me right now. Hold on. 1 second. I'm sorry. So sorry. Here, let me turn my light on real quick. There we are. Hey, now I'm here. You can see me. What is going on, everybody? Hey, welcome back into the Fan Cave where we talk about everything and anything Jacksonville Jaguars. You know, this has been something I'm excited to do because it's a stream that is, in my opinion, it's about time it happened. You know, I've been hyping up my pick so far for the 2021 Jacksonville Jaguar season, and it's about time, in my opinion, that I finally shared who I think is going to be making the 53-man roster on this squad. Now, what I'd love all of you to do right now is drop in the comments right now who you think is like a sneaky pick to make the 53-man roster. That is my big question of the stream that I want to pose to you guys. In your opinion, who makes the 53-man roster that a lot of people don't have on their radar? That's what I would love to hear right now. Who's your sneaky fantasy lock? That's what I want to know right now, guys. So, excuse me while I try and organize my stream here for a second. I'm a little bit unorganized. But that's what I want to hear from you guys. Who do you think belongs on this roster? Whether you think Jeff Cotton has snuck his way onto a roster spot in this Jacksonville Jaguar squad. Whether maybe you have that big outlandish take that Taven Bryan still belongs on the squad. I'd love to hear those types of takes. You know, even if you're like, hell, we shouldn't have traded for Gardner Minshew. If you're mad about the Gardner Minshew trade, I'd love to hear about it as well. This is a this is a Jaguars fan show. My name is Jags Fan Cave. I'm here for you, the fans. I like to consider myself the voice of the voiceless as Jacksonville Jaguars fans. So that is what I pose to you. Who do you believe should be making this squad that you don't believe that a lot of people have faith in? Maybe, who knows, maybe you're an Andrew Wingard fan. If you are, awesome. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You know, that's what this channel is all about, is you voicing your opinions where you don't have a place to voice them. Now, like I said, this is going to be me breaking down the 53-man roster and how I believe it will go. And I believe on Tuesday, actually, whenever they officially announce who will be on the 53-man roster. This will be my take on it. Who knows? If you have a different take than me, please. I'd love to hear you down in the chat. I'd love to interact with you, get to know you, say what's up, and who knows? Maybe even have you join the Fan Cave community. Come back for another live stream. Check out a video or two. Hey, I'd love to have it. You all are welcome. So let's roll right into. I'd say this is the easiest decision of the entire, outside of special teams, with the kicker, punter, long snapper. This is the easiest decision when somebody's making their 53-man roster. It's the quarterback position, right? You want to talk about just who is on the roster? We have 3 quarterbacks on the roster. We have Trevor Lawrence, who is going to make the roster. You don't draft somebody of number 1 overall and then cut them that year. Ryan Leaf wasn't that bad. Okay, so Trevor Lawrence makes it. You know, it was the Trevor Lawrence Beathard Minshew show. Minshew gets dealt to Philadelphia for the conditional 6th round pick. So now it literally just leaves Trevor Lawrence and C.J. Beathard. I'm not going to include Jake Luton because if you're taking snaps against the Cowboys 4s and 5s at that point, they were, you know, scraping the bottom of their depth chart for people to play against Jake Luton. So for me, I have 2 quarterbacks on my 53-man roster. I have Jake Luton. I had Luton on my mind. I'm sorry. I have 2 quarterbacks on my starting 53. I have Trevor Lawrence, and I have C.J. Beathard. You know, people like to say that the reason Beathard's on the roster is because of the guaranteed money. I don't believe that at all. I believe it's because Minshew had trade value. Beathard doesn't. That is strictly one of the only reasons I believe Minshew got dealt. Beathard didn't. That guaranteed money, I don't believe it has a whole lot of credence to the fact that he is going to make the 53. Because without a doubt, if I had to give a lock right now, it would be those 2 right now, saying that Beathard and Lawrence are locks, mortal locks. You know, I'll delete my channel. I'll sell my Jaguars memorabilia if Beathard and Lawrence don't make the team. That's blanket cut and dry. But so let's go right into running backs now. Now, this one's a bit of a contentious pick. You know, I've seen a lot of love for Devine Ezigbo coming into this. Now, it's a matter of who are you willing to have at the bottom of your depth chart. This is one of those positions where you can have someone that's affecting the 50th spot, the 51st, the 52nd, the 53rd, players like that, where it is the bottom of the depth chart, but you still want him to dress on game days. Who is that? You know, off rip, James Robinson and Carlos Hyde are going to make this team. It'd be rough. It'd be hard for me to say that, you know, Carlos Hyde doesn't make this team. That's the one that's the contentious pick right now. Of, you know, he has the money on his contract. He has the relationship with Urban Meyer, but does he have the overall work? Does he have the production into his 30s now? Because I believe he's a 31-year-old running back. And as you all know, once they hit that like 28, 29 mark, they just don't perform the way that they used to, like they did whenever they were James Robinson's age, whenever they were, you know, Etienne's age, when they were that young running back that had a lot of juice and somewhat fresh legs coming out of college. They were elite running backs. Now what are they? They are not. Is Carlos Hyde going to be able to be that running back that he was previous to, you know, because whenever he was here, I believe it was 2019, 2018, he was a bum. He was a wash. He was nothing. He was fugazi. Yeah, he was nothing. You know, it was why the hell did we pick this guy up? Why did we trade for him? I believe we gave up a 5th-round pick for him. So that's something that I'm ultimately curious to know as to why, you know, what is the ultimate goal that with Carlos Hyde being on this squad. And so, excuse me one second. There we are. All right. But like I said, what is the ultimate advantage to having Carlos Hyde on this team? To me, but like I said, I believe Urban Meyer is loyal to a fault. And so at the end of the day, Urban is too loyal. He cannot not commit to somebody he brought in. Ultimately, I do think he moves on from a wide receiver, but we'll get that in a second. But for my running backs, I have James Robinson, Carlos Hyde, and Dare Ogunbowale. I have 3 running backs making the squad. Potentially, this is where I kind of get, you know, tossed up a little bit, because if Jeff Cotton doesn't make the roster, because I believe that he will make a roster. He will make one of the 32. That is a blanket. He will make one of the 32. It is a matter of if he makes our 32 or 53 rather. So that, you know, Divine Ezigbo, whether or not, because I put him and Jeff Cotton in the same plane. If he doesn't make this Jaguars 53, he will make someone else's 53. Are you willing to lose that level of talent? Because at the end of the day, you might say, yes, it's a bottom of the roster spot, but it is still one of the 53 best in on the team. We started this with 90. I believe we're at 80 right now. Can you legitimately tell me that he is not one of the 53 best players on the team? From what you've seen so far, can you say that? That is what I want to ask you right now. Can you tell me that Divine Ezigbo is one of the 53 best players on this team? From what you've seen so far in preseason, what you've heard coming out of training camp. Can you tell me that Jeff Cotton is not one of the best wide receivers, one of the 6 best wide receiver that we have right now? Are you willing to sacrifice him for a Philip Dorsett? That is what I want to ask you right now, because that is a massive question mark going into this 53-man build, and I promise you that is exactly the same question that Urban Meyer and Trent Baalke are asking themselves in that war room that they built up to discuss what is going on with this 53-man roster on the offensive side of the ball. Now, I mentioned Jeff Cotton. I want to roll right into the rest of the wide receivers that are on this squad. Obvious names: Chark, Jones, Shenault. Those are the easy names. We don't have to worry about those names. We don't have to question those names. So that is what I want to pose to you guys, is who you think belongs outside of those 3. On my list, I have a couple special teamers, and I have, you know, a name that we just talked about. I have Laquan Treadwell and Tavon Austin both making the squad. I do. At the end of the day, you talk about Chark, Jones, Shenault. That's 3. You bump it up with Treadwell and Austin. That puts us at 5. 2 players that have absolutely shown out, and that Austin actually has the speed that Urban Meyer is looking for in his offenses. He brings in Philip Dorsett to potentially be that speed, but I believe he found a diamond in the rough with Tavon Austin, and that actually elevates him to that next level of being an elite quick offense. That is what I believe Urban Meyer can use Tavon Austin for. Obviously, everyone, whenever they're warming up for their Pee Wee football games, they're watching the highlight films of Tavon Austin running deep underneath the ball. That is what they love to see. That is what Tavon Austin's known for. He still has that speed. And I believe he has a lot of depth being added to as a special teamer as well. I have him as actually one of my kick returners and punt returners on this roster. That is who I have Tavon Austin being. And, he's one of those names whenever I posed it in the beginning saying, who do you believe can make this roster? Tavon Austin's one of them, in my opinion. Obviously, Jamal Agnew was brought on to be the returner. He was. That's what they paid him for. That is what his specialty is. He's brought on to be a special teamer. But the one thing Tavon Austin has that Jamal Agnew doesn't is the ability to be a wide receiver. And at the end of the day, I do have Agnew making this team as well, bringing my total of wide receivers to 6. But we're not done because I do have another wide receiver that I'm going to announce. But overall, right now, we've got Chark, Jones, Shenault, Treadwell, Austin, and Jamal Agnew. Jamal Agnew is someone that offers an insane amount of return ability. They like to say that they haven't really unleashed what Jamal Agnew is. Man, I'm excited for that at the very minimum, just to see what he becomes and what he offers in the punt return game and the kick return game. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have a good special teams, you are nothing. That is blanket. You can't win Super Bowls with a bad special team. You can't win regular games with bad special teams. We've seen that starting off in the first couple weeks, where you have Trevor Lawrence potentially trying to lead a drive, and then the second the offense receives the ball on a punt return, a 15-yard penalty for something stupid on the special teams immediately sets back the entire squad on offense. Immediately does. So without having a quality special teams, your offense and your defense are nothing. That is blanket. I will argue that all day long. Special teams is equally as important as offense and defense. But I digress. Finishing off my 7 wide receivers on this squad. I have 7 so far. I have Chark, Jones, Shenault, blanket, easy, right? Then I have Treadwell and Austin. I talked about them. I believe they've had great camps, and they deserve roster spots going into the 2021 season, as well as Jamal Agnew. He has shown out. He was brought in to be a returner, and now that leaves us with this 7th of 7 roster spots that I have for wide receivers allotted. Ultimately, I did have, I really bounced back and forth with this between a Philip Dorsett, a Pharaoh Cooper, or Jeff Cotton. And that brings me back to what I was talking about, where are you willing to lose him to another squad? Are you? Because he will not survive a day on waivers. He won't. He will not pass waivers. He will not make your practice squad. And so are you willing to lose a player of that caliber to another team? In my eyes, no. He has shown enough in the preseason, whether it be, he's shown that he's willing to work for it. And at the end of the day, that's all you can ask for. You want to talk about players that have worked for it. James Robinson. Yes, he has the talent level from his college years, yes. And he has the talent level from that. But Jeff Cotton shows that almost the same desire and work ethic that James Robinson showed last year. Even though they didn't have a preseason, they rolled right into week 1. He shows that same heart and desire that James Robinson showed in 2020 to make him a successful football player. Now, even if he ends up being the 5th, 6th, 7th wide receiver on the depth chart, at the end of the day, why nothing hurts this team by having him on the roster. The only thing that would hurt this team is not having him available to use. DJ Chark has not played a full season in the NFL. He is not. And DJ Chark is injury prone, and the best thing you can do to aid that is to have other capable receivers in order to be depth. Blanket. That is what it is. DJ Chark has not played a full season in the NFL. So can Jeff Cotton be that safety valve? Can Laquan Treadwell, can Tavon Austin be that safety valve in the event that DJ Chark continues this trend of not being able to stay healthy? So as I finish up with the wide receivers, that's what I'm going to post to you guys again. Who is a player on your own 53-man roster in your head? Who is that player that you believe has the sneaky lock to make the 53-man roster? That's what I want to ask you. That's what I'm here to be your voice. And I would love to have you sound off in my chat. I'd love to hear you interact with me. I would love to hear you guys. I would love to hear your opinions on what is going on with your Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, 1 second. So I'm going to go from the wide receiver room immediately into the tight end room. I'm going to go right into that. This tight end room is a light tight end room in my opinion. I don't think that obviously this tight end room was the center of controversy because it was a tight end room that included old Timothy Tebow. He was somebody that was brought in and no one really knew what the hell was going on. It was an absolute urban pick to bring him into the tight end room. And, man, it was just weird having him on the team. But I digress. He's no longer on the team. So, starting off is the tight end acquisition we got from Carolina, Chris Manhertz. He is somebody that he was brought in to be the blocking tight end, which I have no problem with. At the end of the day, if you have that six lineman, if you will, if you have that six lineman, I'm okay with that because there's nothing wrong with having that extra blocker. There's that extra that potential receiving threat off the line. You want to talk about the elite tight ends in the league. We don't have one. Blanket, even if we did draft for Zach Ertz, we wouldn't have one. We just wouldn't. Zach Ertz isn't going to be one. You want to talk about any team that has an elite level tight end is not trading for that elite level tight end. He's not. They're not. They won't. And so that's what I want to say is that coming on, when you look at this starting 53, they're not going to have an elite tight end. They're not going to have a very, very good tight end. They're going to have a bunch of serviceable tight ends that meet the purpose of the tight end. They're going to be good blockers. They're going to have semi-functional hands, and they're going to be just adequate players on this roster. I'm going to blanket say that right now. And like I said, Chris Manhertz has the ability to be that elite level blocking tight end. Notice I said blocking. He's not going to be that elite pass catching tight end. He's just going to be the elite level blocking tight end. That's what they brought him in here to be, and to be that sixth man. And by all accounts, that's exactly what he has been so far. He's been that I'm good for 10 to 20 catches a year, maybe 30 if you really stretch it. Give him 1 to 2 targets a game. Cool. But he is here to be that blocking tight end for James Robinson, Carlos Hyde, Ogunbowale, players of that nature. He's not here to pad Trevor Lawrence's stat line. That is blanket. That's not what he's here to do. Now, going from Chris Manhertz, I'm going to go directly into James O'Shaughnessy, James O'Shag Hennessy. He is somebody that has been on this Jaguars team for a while. He was I believe he was the one that caught the Blake almost jump pass in the 2017 game against the Bills. It was just, I might be wrong on that. Don't quote me on that. But, he's been that serviceable tight end that has the ability to show out and to be that, third down receiver in a pinch. He's just kind of that, I'm going to hang out all game and then I'll escape. I'll get you the third down conversion. I'll get you this, that, the other. I'm not going to be the game breaker, but I will be your safety valve. And we got, Beanie Baby up in chat. Go Jags, man. Hell yeah. Go Jags. Let me know. Who do you think is a good pick on the bottom half of this depth chart to make the roster? I'd love to hear your pick. I've already had one with Jeff Cotton making this roster. I think that he's too good to release. And, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Who you think is a sneaky pick to make the bottom half of the depth chart, whatever position you think. If you think, Chris Claybrooks has a shot at the roster, if you think of a safety, a linebacker, whoever, I'd love to hear your take as well down in the chat. I'd love to talk to you, interact with you, get to know you a little bit, man. And so far for this tight end room, I got 3 of them. I don't have more than 3. It's just 3 right now. I got Chris Manhertz as that blocker. I got James O'Shag Hennessy, James O'Shaughnessy coming in as a potential wide receiving threat for this tight end room. And then I have Chris Farrell. Chris Farrell is somebody they invested, I believe, a 5th-round draft pick in this last year's draft. And you don't cut draft picks. I'm firm on that. If you draft him, you believe in him, unless they absolutely shit the bed and they just lose all ability to play football. You don't cut him. And Chris Farrell, he was drafted, so at minimum, in my opinion, it's almost owed him that he gives him the 1 year of development because we showed the trust in him to hopefully become who he thinks he can be. Now, so right now, just to do a quick recap of who we have so far, we have Trevor Lawrence and C.J. Beathard at quarterback. I have 2 quarterbacks making this roster. At running back, I have 3. I have James Robinson, Carlos Hyde, and James Ogunbowale as the third down back. I don't believe, Divine Azigbo, it was a little too late, in my opinion. If you'd have shown what you had prior to this game in Dallas, I believe you have a shot. But you're going up against players that have shown what they've got from Cleveland to New Orleans to Dallas. All you've shown us is Dallas. So that's what I mean when I say it's just too little too late, is that where was it in Cleveland and where was it against Cleveland and in New Orleans? That's what I want to know, and you didn't show it, so you didn't make my 53. I'm sorry, man, but at the end of the day, if it was me making that decision, you don't make this roster. And then we go right into the wide receiving room. We've got DJ Chark, Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault. Easy choices right there. Then I've got Laquan Treadwell and Tavon Austin making this roster. I want to talk about showing something against Cleveland, in New Orleans, in Dallas. I believe all 3 of them showed enough, they both showed enough in those 3 games to become Jacksonville Jaguars in this 2021 year, as well as Jamal Agnew. He was brought in to be the return man. He was brought in to be that return specialist. That is what he's here for. And then at the end of the day, I want to say Jeff Cotton. Jeff Cotton makes this roster because I believe that he's too good to release. Am I going to say, I want to talk, because it's hard, because I talk about Divine Azigbo being not good enough to make the roster and too little too late. I believe Jeff Cotton's shown just enough. When I tell you that Jeff Cotton is probably my 53rd man on this roster, he's probably my 53rd. And, it's just like, man, he is the 53rd man because he is just, in my opinion, he's shown too much to let him go. And so with that being said, he makes my 53. He's the 7th of the 7 wide receivers I have on this roster. Now going right into the tight end room, we got Chris Manhertz to be the blocker, James O'Shaughnessy to be the receiving threat, and Chris Farrell just to continue to let him develop because they saw something in him to draft him. And so with that being said, if they had enough to draft him, he belongs on the roster. So let's go right into the offensive line. And I'll say this right now. I have 10 offensive linemen. I have 10. This offensive line has done nothing but be inconsistent and have injury hazards. Starting off with the left tackle position, I have I'll do a blanket. I'll name everyone real quick. My starting 5 is easy. Cam Robinson, Andrew Norwell, Brandon Linder, AJ Cann, and Jawan Taylor. That's my starting 5. That's they're the ones that brought us into the dance. They're the ones we're going to dance with. And if it just so happens that our date breaks her ankle, we're gonna put in a new different person. We're just gonna be plug and play all season long, because that appears what it's gonna be anyway. With the fact that Trevor Lawrence has yet to play one game behind a complete starting offensive line. I believe in against Cleveland, he was playing with 4 of the 5, maybe 3 of the 5. Against New Orleans, I know for a fact he was playing with 3 of the 5. And then against Dallas, he was playing with 1 of the 5. Man, did AJ Cann play? Because at the end of the day, but still, 2 of the 5 or 1 of the 5 doesn't really make that much of a difference at that point. Whenever you have backups playing with them, but I will say this: the backups played well today. They did, despite the fact that they were playing against a squad that had very little going for it, and whenever they had very little, whenever they had they didn't have a whole lot. They didn't. I'll be straight up and say that they didn't have a whole lot going for them into this game, But at the end of the day, I believe they made up for it with what they could today. With what they could, they showed out with what they had. And so I'm going to go ahead and rattle off my backups at each position because I do have 10. So I have a player, I have a starter, then a backup for each position because I'm nervous right now with how much this with this offensive line has shown. I don't want to roll into week 1 and then end up in week 3 where I'm having to pick up, off the street free agents. I'd rather roll in with 10 on the 53 that I know are competent, that I've seen before, that I've known, and that I've watched in camp than I would rolling in from having 3 backups and having 8 offensive linemen on the roster. I'd rather have 10 and know that I have a serviceable, mediocre, but better than trash level offensive line to fill in the entire offensive line space, if that makes sense. So backing up left tackle, I have the second round draft pick, Walker Little out of Stanford. That's easy. Walker Little was a lock to make this team because you want to talk about getting scooped up right away. That's Walker Little. I believe Ben Bartch has shown just enough to make the squad. He is someone that he will live in draft lore solely because of the fact that he, had his crazy little shake that he made, and he drank it at the combine, made himself on TV. He ends up in Jacksonville, right? So he's going to be a serviceable backup. That's about all he's going to be, in my opinion. Unless he really develops into something crazy, I can't see him overtaking Andrew Norwell in the coming year or two. That's just blank. I don't see Ben Bartch being anything but a serviceable backup. Tyler Shalley, he's the best backup this team has. He is. There's a reason I have him playing at backup center, is because you put your best offensive lineman at center. You do, because he is the quarterback of that offensive line. He came to us as a guard, and he immediately announced himself as the best offensive lineman. This was during the Luke Jokel days. This was, he was just a bad offensive lineman. And especially since he's built like a guard, you want him there. So, Tyler Shalley, he was just as much of a lock as Walker Little was to make this roster, in my opinion. Trevor Wallace Sims, a name probably a lot of you are not familiar with, and that's okay because I wasn't familiar with it before the time I spent to research this video and get this all prepared for you guys. So, with that being said, I don't believe that he has anything bad against him, but I believe he's played serviceably enough to make this roster and to earn himself a 53-man roster paycheck at the end of the day. And then rounding us off with our 10th offensive lineman that I believe is going to make the squad is Will Richardson. He's another one of those. He's a legacy offensive lineman here in Jacksonville, and he's filled in for Jawan Taylor whenever he has gone down, and he's been serviceable at minimum. Because I have a hard time judging these offensive linemen whenever they've been playing in front of a quarterback that's biggest downside is the fact that he doesn't know how to stay in the pocket in Gardner Minshew. So how much can you judge a quarterback on having a pocket collapsing when 80% of the time he's rolling out of that pocket, even if it wasn't collapsing? So Will Richardson absolutely has a claim to be on this roster, and I'm excited to see what this offensive line does because I have been I feel like the lone standout. I know on Jaguars Twitter I get a lot of hate for saying that this offensive line might not be that bad, and because you haven't seen the entire offensive line yet. You haven't. At best you've seen the 4 out of the 5 because Cam hasn't played a whole bunch. Norwell I don't think has played in a single preseason game. Linder I believe played in Cleveland, and so it's just this kind of haze over the offensive line of, man, I've just seen them play like ass. Yeah, it's because you haven't seen the entire offensive line play. If you have number 1s going up against number 2s, of course they're going to look bad. They're not there to be starters. They're there to be backups in an emergency situation. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and read off real quick my entire starting offense. I have 25 of the 53 on this starting roster. So with quarterback, it's quarterback Gardner Minshew, not Gardner Minshew. Misspoke there for a second. It's going to be Trevor Lawrence and C.J. Beathard, my two starting quarterbacks, my two quarterbacks that make this roster. On top of that, it's going to be, I have 3 running backs, James Robinson, Carlos Hyde, and Dare Ungumbuwale as my third down back. That's who I have. Divine Azigbo just hasn't shown enough for me. I have 7 wide receivers making this roster. DJ Chark, Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault, Easy, Laquan Treadwell, and Tavon Austin, I believe, have played their way into a roster spot on this 53-man roster. Jamal Agnew, he was brought here to be a return specialist. He's there to be special teams. I'm cool with that. And then here's one of my my sleeper picks is Jeff Cotton. You have to look at it and say, are you willing to let him go? Are you willing to see him make plays on another squad? Jaguars fans kick themselves for seeing Allen Lazard playing very, very well in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. Are you willing to see that happen again? Are you willing to see Allen Lazard Part 2 with Jeff Cotton? Because if you're willing to cut him, that means you're willing to see him make plays on another squad, which he will. He has shown that talent level on this roster. Excuse me. But I digress on that. And then I go right into my tight end room. I have 3 tight ends making this roster. I have Chris Manhertz, James O'Shaughnessy, and Luke Farrell. Those are the 3 I have making this team. Those are the 3 that I believe are the only 3 that really have earned their spot. One, because Manhertz and O'Shaughnessy, they are proven veterans in this league at what they do well. And Luke Farrell, he is just someone that was drafted, so in my opinion, I believe he's earned that spot off rip. Now, for my starting 5 offensive linemen, they're probably going to sound very similar because they're the exact same as they were in 2020. Cam Robinson, Andrew Norwell, Brandon Linder, AJ Cann, and Jawan Taylor. Now, I do have very little faith in this offensive line's ability to stay healthy. So I'm actually going to carry a full fleet of offensive linemen to back them up with Walker Little, Ben Bartch, Tyler Shalley, Trevor Wallace-Sims, and then Will Richardson. I have a full fleet of offensive linemen behind them. But I want to pose it to you guys, and I want to ask you, who is a player that you think is a sneaky pick to make this roster? There's a lot of contention from 50 to 53 on this team of who you need to have on this roster, and then who the bottom half of the roster is a lot of contention. With Jeff Cotton, with Divine Azigbo, possibly Philip Dorsett. You want to talk about Chris Claybrooks, Daniel Thomas, players of that nature on this team. That really, what do they offer? Well, they offer just enough to potentially make the squad. That's the problem. So you've got to get to a point where you're almost splitting hairs because you're trying to decide whether or not one is more serviceable than the other. And in my opinion, Divine Azigbo does not offer the exact same things that Jeff Cotton does. And then once I get into the defense, there's a couple of players on there that I think will have the same almost like shock factor that Jeff Cotton does. But we got Beanie Baby saying up in chat, I was thinking the same about the O-line, not that bad. Hey, man, exactly. They're not that bad. You have not seen them play, and you have not seen them play in front of a quality quarterback. You put Patrick Mahomes behind that offensive line. You put Aaron Rodgers behind that offensive line. This team would be serviceable, and no one would be complaining about the offensive line. It's the fact that they had, Jake Luton, Mike Glennon, and Gardner Minshew. When the hell are they making starts in another squad? But you want to put them in front. You want to put them behind an offensive line, and because they struggle, you want to blame it on the offensive line. Get out of here with that mess. You don't blame. You don't blame an offensive line for crappy quarterback play because that's what it was. It was crappy quarterback play. And people like to point out that Jawan Taylor had 8 sacks last year. Yes, that's an issue that should get resolved. But what do you say about the fact that they had a quarterback and behind them that didn't know how to stay in the pocket they were creating? That was the same offensive line that led a running back to over 1,000 yards in only 14 games. So it's got to be one of the two. You can't have a crappy offensive line with a 1,000-yard rusher, and you can't have a 1,000-yard rusher with a crappy offensive line. So I digress on that, and let me take another quick hydration break real quick. So we're going to go right into the defensive line here. This is where, man, I spent a lot of time on this defensive side. I did. There's some players on here that I think are deserving of spots that don't get them. And I'm going to start it off right now with defensive tackles, and then including the nose tackles as well. I'm going to start off by saying Malcolm Brown makes this squad. Easy blanket, Malcolm Brown, right? Devon Hamilton, and Jay Tufele. Two draft picks in the prior 2 years. They make this squad just as the same as Luke Farrell does. You don't cut somebody that you just recently drafted. You let them develop to at least get them to a point where they can potentially be a quality backup. Because look at Sheldon Day. Sheldon Day is still out there creating plays in the NFL. At the end of if we had Sheldon Day on the squad, do we need to draft a Jay Tufele? Do we need a Devon Hamilton? Possibly not, because at the end of the day, Sheldon Day fills that spot, so we can have that draft pick for another spot on the squad. And so, for me, you give every draft pick 3 years. If by year 3 they still look like ass, I don't have a problem with you cutting bait and just moving on from them. But I will say this: there's a player on the squad that I think a lot of Jaguar fans have cut bait on unnecessarily. So I will say Doug Costin came in last year as an undrafted free agent into the Jacksonville Jaguars team, and I think he showed just enough in 2020 to warrant him getting another spot on this 2021 squad. He's a hell of a defensive lineman, and overall, I've seen him make a lot of quality plays in the preseason so far. So I believe he's absolutely deserving of a roster spot. Now, here's one of those point of contentions I was talking about on this defense. I think Taven Bryan makes this team. I do. Do I like the fact that Taven Bryan makes the team? Not really. But do I think he makes it because of the fact that he almost has that CJ Henderson effect to him, where he's got this talent level about him that no one knows what the hell to do with. And I'm not going to say that because he's developed like ass. He has. He is not developed to be the number one. He's not developed to be the first round draft pick that we picked him to be. He hasn't. But he has just enough level. He's just enough talent level to warrant staying on this team, to see if Urban Meyer and Joe Cullen can get something out of that. Because if they can, we've got a freak. Because he's the only way he does anything right now is he gets by with just freak of nature strength. That is all he gets by with. That is all he does. And so the fact that if we can actually show him how to use some technique and not just muscle people around, because you're not going to outmuscle a 356-7 offensive lineman. You're not. Those guys eat cars for breakfast. You're not going to out freak them. You're not going to outman them. Those are dudes going up against Taven Bryan. So he needs to learn some technique, which I'm hoping Joe Cullen and Urban Meyer can show him. And then, so I got five defensive tackles making this squad that have a good rotation, And then for the defensive ends, I'm going to lump in the linebackers, those outside rushers. I'm going to lump them in as well. So your Kayvon Chasons, your Josh Allens, your Jihad Wards. I'm going to lump them in with those because then you've got your three big ends, in my opinion. Or, excuse me, you have your three pass rushers in Josh Allen, Kayvon Chason, and Jihad Ward. Jihad Ward could be argued that he's a big end. In my opinion, I think he's just small enough to be still considered just a strict pass rusher. But when you want to talk about big ends, you definitely need to immediately start the conversation with Dawuane Smoot. Dawuane Smoot is someone that has shown out in this preseason so far. He's been that capable defensive lineman that has the ability to shut down the run, but at the same time also get after the passer. Recording that sack, I believe it was in New Orleans, he recorded his sack. And so Dawuane Smoot absolutely starts the conversation for the big ends. Now we've got the draft pick Jordan Smith. Same argument as the rest of them. You do not cut them until year 3, unless they are just hot ass. Served on a platter to the offensive line where we might as well have 10 dudes out there, not 11. That's the only circumstance in my mind when I am okay with cutting bait with a younger than 3-year defensive, with a younger than 3-year draft pick. That's the only situation. So I absolutely believe Jordan Smith, who had a scholarship to the University of Florida. He had that opportunity to be that Division I player at a massive Power 5 school. So that I'm not concerned with that at all. And he gets caught up in some after-curricular out of school trouble. He ends up going to, I believe, UAB, gets drafted still, I believe, in the fourth or fifth round. So he's not a terrible player. He was an early day 3 pick. And he, hopefully he can come into Jacksonville, be that pass rusher that the University of Florida brought him in to be. And then also, I believe he was a free agent acquisition, Roy Robertson Harris. He's shown out as well. I believe he has a pass deflected. Actually, in Dallas, he got his hands up, he got in the way, he disrupted the quarterback, and that's the last thing a quarterback wants to see is a defensive lineman disrupting his passing lanes with his hands in the air. Remember years ago, J.J. Watt was such a menace in the NFL that teams were literally practicing with tennis rackets. They would just have coaches holding up tennis rackets to train their quarterbacks to pass in those lanes where J.J. Watt would not be. That is the level of havoc a defensive lineman can bring solely off of the fact that they have their hands up. And Roy Robertson Harris did that. And so I'm excited to see what he offers going into this 2021 year as a newly anointed Jaguar. But I want to ask the same question again to all of you guys in the stream. Who is a player that you think makes this squad that a lot of other people don't think makes the team? I've offered my point off of saying Jeff Cotton is one that I believe is just too good to cut. That's going to be almost like, I want to say that's the phrase of the stream, is he's too good to cut. And the Allen Lazard effect, do you want to see him making plays on another squad? That's what it comes down to. Are you willing to see that player making plays on another team when you had the opportunity to see them make those plays? But I digress on the Jeff Cotton. So I'm going to go right into the linebackers. I have 4 linebackers, true linebackers, I guess you could say in the sense of the word, making this team. At Mike linebacker, I have Damian Wilson. He was brought in to be the Mike whenever, we picked him up. I believe it was I don't even think we traded for him. I think it was just a flat trade, or a flat pickup, excuse me. We pick up Damian Wilson. We put him in the roster, and then shortly after we get the announcement of the Joe Schobert trade. So that quickly puts Damian Wilson into the front lines of this starting defense. So that being said, what have we really seen out of him? It's hard to say. He hasn't shown a bunch in the preseason games, but that doesn't mean he hasn't shown enough, obviously, to say that Joe Schobert wasn't the right pick, but Damian Wilson is. Maybe it's a scheme fit. I don't know. I don't know what Joe Cullen and Urban Meyer are talking about in those coaches' meetings. So at the end of the day, in Urban we trust. That's been my motto since the day he was picked up as head coach of the Jaguars. In Urban we trust. So Damian Wilson, if he's willing to be that Mike linebacker, hell yeah, welcome to the squad. Backing him up at the Mike position, I have Duval I'll say 904 native, because he did go to Oakleaf. So, but Shaq Quarterman has had one preseason that I think is like on the same level of as Laquan Treadwell and Tavon Austin. You want to talk about somebody that has made their roster spot invaluable? Shaq Quarterman has. Shaq Quarterman has shown that he belongs on this roster and that he is an athletic freak. That he is the exact reason why I have that 3-year rule because when you want to talk about drafting Shaq Quarterman, he looked lost. He looked like he didn't know what he was doing. He just looked out of place. Now, whenever you look at Shaq Quarterman play in the NFL, he looks like he knows what the hell he's doing. He's flying to the ball. He's closing gaps, and he's manning his gaps. Those are the 2 biggest things that you can ask out of a linebacker in the National Football League. Is you close gaps between an offender and yourself to make the tackle, and then you also close gaps in the running lanes. That's exactly what I like to see out of my linebackers, and that is exactly what Shaq Quarterman has done in this preseason so far. He has had a tremendous camp and a tremendous preseason, and I'm excited to see what he offers heading into these coming years as a Jacksonville Jaguar. I'm hoping that he does pick up a second contract in Jacksonville. But I'm going to head over to the weak side linebacker, the will linebacker position, Miles Jack. That's not a question. If I had to, there's probably 4 locks on this team. Brandon Linder being center, James Robinson being the running back number 1, Trevor Lawrence being the quarterback number 1, and Miles Jack being the will linebacker. Those are the blanket, easy decisions right there. And so for backup will linebacker, I've got Dakota Allen. man, you go on ESPN right now, and they've got the depth chart being Russell ahead of Dakota Allen. Everything I've seen out of Dakota Allen has shown that he belongs at that backup spot. You check the stat sheet of every single game in this preseason so far. There's one name between those two on it, and it's Dakota Allen. Dakota Allen has made plays in every single game so far, and I believe that's earned him the right to be a Jacksonville Jaguar heading into the 2021 season. But with four linebackers, it's a tough cut because you've got a lot of great talent with Chappelle Russell. He's another one that he's probably going to get picked up very quickly on another squad. So, with that being said, I'm going to roll right into the six corners that I have making this Jacksonville Jaguar squad. Starting off, it's the easy decision. It's Shaq Griffin. He was brought here to be the potential number one corner, and that is, I'm not going to say that's what he's played as because he's struggled. There's been several plays where he's given him up, and he's just kind of lacked that talent that a number one corner should have. You want to think back to Jalen Ramsey era days, man. I feel bad for even mentioning his name on stream, but you want to talk about the Jalen Ramsey era of cornerback play in Jacksonville with AJ Boye and Jalen Ramsey. There was not a pass that wasn't contended. There's been passes that have been open in Jacksonville this year. And Shaq Griffin, obviously, he wasn't paid like a true number one. He wasn't traded like a Tre'Davious White or a Jalen Ramsey or a Stephon Gilmore in New England. He wasn't paid like one of them, so I'm not upset with like that. But still, he was brought in to be the number one and the leader on this Jacksonville Jaguar squad. But I do have six, like I said. Easy four are Shaq Griffin, C.J. Henderson, Tyson Campbell, and Sidney Jones. That's it. That's easy. Those are the easy choices. You can even say number 5 on this list, Trey Herndon, is an easy choice. That's another easy choice right there. Now, you want to talk about someone that I believe the Minshew trade actually opened up a lot of room for on this roster, and that is a potential special teams player, and that is someone by the name of Chris Claybrooks. You want to talk about someone that has elite world birding speed? That's Chris Claybrooks. Man, I've never been able to say his name easily, but Chris Claybrooks has shown a lot in his speed. He hasn't shown a whole heck of a lot in the fact that he can be a capable corner. But just like you're keeping Agnew to be the punt returner, the kick returner kind of role, I absolutely believe you can keep Chris Claybrooks to be that exact same type of role in this, except on the defensive side, because God forbid someone goes down, anything like that. He's a capable corner. He's that capable sixth on the team in case a corner goes down, and he also offers that special teams aspect. That is something at the end of the day where if you do not offer that special teams aspect, you're going to have a hard time convincing me of why you belong on the squad. Especially at the bottom 5 to 8 on the roster if you don't have that special teams option. But rounding off my top 6, I have at corner, I have Shaq Griffin, C.J. Henderson, Tyson Campbell, Sidney Jones, Trey Herndon, and Chris Claybrooks. Because at the end of the day, I think that they offer the most out of all of the potential candidates. And between Trey Herndon and Chris Claybrooks, I believe they offer the most outside of their actual natural corner position in special teams, and as also just as veteran leadership for C.J. Henderson and Tyson Campbell, as with them both being 2 years or less or 1 year or less in the league. But I'm going to go right into the safety position because we are up against about an hour right now. We're about 10 minutes out of an hour, so I want to kind of wrap this up close. But I want to roll right into the safety position. This was by far the easiest class to make outside of the quarterback room. You want to talk about 4 players that have really, really shown out and that have shown that they belong in the National Football League. Whew. For starters, I've got Andre Sisco starting Week 1 against Houston. I do. From what I saw against Cleveland, he became a player that said, "I am here to be an elite level safety in this league." You want to talk about elite level safety play in Jacksonville, you immediately think of Donovan Darius. You want to know, you could put their two tape together. What do you see? You see Donovan Darius that has the ball hawking skills of a corner. I believe he had five or more interceptions in his last year at Syracuse alone. So with that being said, Andre Sisco needs to be on the field in week 1 against Houston. And opposite of him, I've got Rayshawn Jenkins. He was brought over from the Los Angeles Chargers to be that elite level safety. Whether he's elite or not, that's okay. Because at the end of the day, I'm expecting Andre Sisco to be that elite level safety. Rayshawn Jenkins just has to be serviceable. That's all I'm expecting out of Rayshawn Jenkins is serviceable. Now, you might be thinking, because as a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, we've been so beat down, we think that Andrew Wingard is a serviceable safety. No, I'm talking about a pro-level serviceable. I'm not talking about an FCS level serviceable. I want to see competent safety play. I don't want to see a player look over his shoulder and then see someone running by him for a 30-yard touchdown. That's not what I want at all. But I digress on that. We've got Rayshawn Jenkins and Andre Sisco playing safety, and then backing them up, I have Rudy Ford and Gerard Wilson. Gerard Wilson has the experience in Jacksonville. He's used to it. And despite it being a brand new Joe Cullen defense, I believe he's going to settle in very, very well to the Joe Cullen defense. As well as Rudy Ford is just someone that I expect to have a very long career in the NFL. I almost think about Ryan Fitzpatrick-esque as the fact that he can, he's never going to be that starter. But he can play for you in a pinch, and he can be that adequate level player for you in that safety back room. So my safeties, I'm going to finish them off with. I have 4 of them: Rayshawn Jenkins, Andre Sisco, Rudy Ford, and Gerard Wilson. Those are the 4 I have making the safety room. Now that I finished off the defense, I want to ask it once more: who is a player that is your sneaky pick to make this 2021 Jacksonville Jaguar squad? For me, it's Jeff Cotton. Because at the end of the day, he is too good to not have on the roster. He's not, or he is too good. The reason I say that is because look at Allen Lazard. What is he doing right now? He's making plays in Green Bay. He's an adequate part of that playoff push they had last year, all the way to the NFC Championship game. He was catching passes from Aaron Rodgers in the NFC Championship game that mattered. It wasn't just a nonchalant early in the game little 5-yard out. He was catching meaningful balls in big-time situations. So the last thing I would love to see is that Jeff Cotton go to the Eagles, a team, or the Lions that are really, really struggling, or the Ravens that are really struggling in the wide receiver room. And then for the next 10, 15 years, I'm watching him on my fantasy team and on Red Zone scoring more touchdowns than he ever did in Jacksonville. I'd much rather hold him for a year, let him develop, and then be just contending just the same way that DJ Chark, Marvin Jones, and Laviska Shenault are for that potential number 1 wide receiver spot. I would much rather have 4 people contending because we let 1 develop than 3 contending, and then the 1 in Baltimore, or the 1 in Detroit, or wherever where they needed wide receivers. So that is where my take on Jeff Cotton comes in: is are you willing to watch him make plays on another team, or are you willing to stash him on your 53? Because I tell you right now, Jeff Cotton will not make waivers. He will not make the practice squad. He will not survive waivers. But that's what I want to ask you. Who is your pick to make this 53-man roster that you think a lot of people have under the radar? But for my special teams, it's a very easy 3. I've got at kicker, Josh Lambo. At punter, I've got Logan Cook. And at long snapper, I've got Ross Masisick. You don't say the long snapper's name a whole lot. I apologize, Ross. And at punt returner, it's the exact same 3 as it is for kick returner: Jamal Agnew, Tavon Austin, and then potentially Chris Claybrooks are my starting 3, my 3 return men. But since we're up about an hour now, I'm going to go ahead and rattle off my total 53-man roster that I believe the Jacksonville Jaguars should do. This isn't what I think they will do. This is what I think would be my perfect 53-man squad, combining all of what they have so far. I have 25 on offense, 25 on defense, and special teams. So, with that being said, let's roll right into this quick little recap. At quarterback, we got Trevor Lawrence and C.J. Beathard. Easy decision right there. I've got three running backs making the squad. I've got Robinson, Hyde, and Ogunbowale as my third down back. At the end of the day, those are the three that I believe will make the squad. I just don't believe Divine Zigbo has done enough to make the squad over players like Laquan Treadwell, Tavon Austin, players like that. I don't believe they've done enough in these three preseason games and in camp to really be that meaningful factor. For in a wide receiver, I've got hey, kid get money. Hey, whether you're late or whether you're early, you're still here, my man. Welcome in. I love to see you in chat, man. Hey, welcome back. Cause I remember you were here last time too. I know I'm late, but we gotta keep Cotton. He showed out all preseason. He did, and that's exactly what I'm saying. Are you willing to see someone else make plays that they should be making on your squad? That's my end of the day discussion for it. It's like, are you willing to see someone else make the plays? Because I'd much rather have Trevor Lawrence throwing to him than I would, Jared Goff in Detroit, where whether it be, God forbid, Minshew's making touchdown pass. Wouldn't that be the biggest slap in the face as a Jaguar fan? Is you see Gardner Minshew making meaningful plays to Jeff Cotton in Philadelphia. Wouldn't that be something? Oh my goodness, that'd feel like Jaguar just epitome though, is that we're just getting stepped on, and we're having crappy little things like that happen to us and just in the NFL. But I digress. I've got 7 wide receivers making the squad. I've got DJ Chark, Marvin Jones Jr., Laviska Shenault Jr. Those are the 7 that are the easy, or those are the 3 that are the easy picks for this wide receiver room. Then I've got Laquan Treadwell and I've got Tavon Austin. I've actually got Treadwell as my number 4 right now. And then I've got Jamal Agnew being the return specialist because he offers so much in special teams. And then for me, it came down to Colin Johnson and Jeff Cotton. It did. Those were the 2 final wide receivers that I was looking at, and I had to discard one. And for me, it came down to, what have you seen out of this year? Not last year, this year. And so far, Jeff Cotton has far and away performed better than Colin Johnson has. I love, man, because that at the same time, I'm going to break my own rule here with you let him develop for 3 years. We did draft Colin Johnson, I believe, in the 6th or 7th round out of Texas. I believe he's got a lot to offer this Jacksonville Jaguar squad, but it comes down to who would you rather see, a dynamic playmaker like Cotton or a big third down wide receiving threat like Colin Johnson, who hasn't made plays thus far. He's had time with Trevor Lawrence, and he's also had time with backup C.J. Beathard. And both of them, he hasn't shown very much. The only time I've really seen his name get called was when it was at the end of the game. I believe it was against New Orleans, whenever Beathard led that late touchdown drive to bring the game close. That was the only time Johnson's name got called. Cotton's name has been called consistently throughout the previous 2 games. I believe it was probably even called during week 1. So for me, I'm going with consistency over the splash, with taking Cotton over Johnson to be that 7th wide receiver on the team. So I'm going to go right into my offensive line. I've got 10 offensive linemen making the squad. I do. With how inconsistent this offensive line has been so far throughout training camp, that is what I'm here to, I'm here to say that this offensive line has been horrible. This, and I don't mean in the way that they've played so far. I mean in the fact that none of them have seen the field consistently. The starting 5 is what I'm referring to when I say they've been horrible. You can't make the club in the tub unless you're one of these starting 5 offensive linemen, apparently, because we've seen what the backup 5 are. And good Lord, if Trevor has to play against or behind that offensive line against a week 1 Houston team with Whitney Merciless and players of that nature, we might see our starting quarterback get killed. I'm just gonna be blanket. I'm gonna be blunt and say that we will watch Trevor. We will watch a murder. I believe September 12th in Houston. We will watch a murder. We will watch the Houston Texans defensive line kill Trevor Lawrence. If we have what we saw in New Orleans and on week 1, but thankfully this offensive line has not played. The starting 5 offensive linemen have not played the way that they have not played. They have not all played together. That's my point. We don't know what the starting five looks like with Trevor behind it because we have not seen it. What we've seen is a lot of backups playing on top of the on top of the on top of the on the injuries that are the COVID list or little like hamstring injuries or small things that are just draining the team, right? So I've got the same starting five as last year. I've got Robinson, Norwell, Linder, Can, Taylor. That's my starting five right there. Easy, right? And then for my backup five, I've got Walker Little, Ben Barch, Tyler Shatley, Trevor Wallace Sims, and Will Richardson. All serviceable backups, in my opinion, if you put one in and you leave the other four. Once you start taking two away, that's when the game really starts to get hairy for me, and I start to worry for Trevor a little bit. He has shown the ability that he can escape the pressure and get out of the pocket, but at the end of the day, I don't want to see that. No one wants to see that. It's like saying I have a car that's A+ safety rated in a car accident. That's great. Do I ever want to test it? No. I'd much rather just boast about the fact that my car has all of these safety features and then not ever have to test them. I would much rather say that, hey, my offensive line can go up against Aaron Donald and the rest of them and never have to actually show it. Because the second you show it, now you're watching Walker Little, Ben Barch, Tyler Shatley, Will Richardson get eaten alive by another starting defensive lineman. So, I've got 25 offensive players making the squad of the 53. On the defensive tackle and nose tackle, I've got Malcolm Brown, Devon Hamilton, Jay Tufele, because they're the two draft picks in my eyes. You can't cut them. Doug Costin showed enough last year to willing to be bringing him on. And then this might be even a hotter take than Jeff Cotton. I have Taven Bryan making this 53-man roster. I believe he's shown just enough and in training camp as a because Joe Cullen has been quoted to say that his roster spot is up for grabs. He didn't show anything negative outside of the one false start in Dallas. He looked like the Taven that's going to Taven when he knew he jumped off sides, and he kind of just threw his arms up in the air. But then they let the play go, so then it was like, oh crap, they're just calling it an offsides, not a false start. And so they ended up rushing. Well, next thing you know, they blow the whistle. So he just kind of looked silly because he did a little pirouette and then tried to rush the guard. But I digress. I've got 5 defensive tackles making the squad with Brown, Hamilton, Tufele, Costin, and Bryan. That's probably going to be the hottest take. I'm probably gonna get some slack for that, saying Taven Bryan's worthy of being on this team, but he is. Oh, come on, kid, get money. No, Taven, let him go. Who are you putting on? All right, so you take Taven away. Who do you put in? Who on that defensive line has shown more willing to be on that squad? Because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to: is who is better than Taven. So that's what I want to ask you, kid. Get money. You're gonna say let him go. Who are you gonna put in a spot? Because you got to have that spot on the roster. Does that spot go to the offensive side? Where does that open spot go? Because now you're just at 52 if you take Taven away. You know what I'm saying? I'd love to hear your opinion on that. Who you think places Taven? But for the defensive end, I've got my outside linebackers in this 3-4 base, and my defensive edge and my big ends kind of lumped together here. So for my pass rusher specifically, I'm gonna go Josh Allen, Caleb Von Chason, and Jahad Ward. Jahad Ward can definitely be that big end, but I think Joe Cullen's going to use him a lot more like a pass rusher. He has shown out. He's shown a lot during, especially. I know he got a lot of screen time this week against Dallas because they kept trying to highlight this backup left tackle for Dallas, and every single stat they showed him struggling because Jahad Ward was pushing him into the Dallas backup's lap. So Jahad Ward definitely showed a lot for me. Use it on offense. Keep Colin Johnson. Wow, so you want to carry 8 wide receivers onto this roster? Woo, man. That's probably where I would go as well if I had to take Taven off this roster and put Colin Johnson and open up that spot. I would absolutely want to. The only downside is what I think is how are you going to squeeze? Even I'll take Agnew off because he's strictly special teams. You've got 7 wide receivers. When are you going to even use 6 with the 7 that I brought on? That's where that hairy spot comes in. Of like, man, whew, 8 wide receivers is a lot of wide receivers. If I had to take Taven off this list, I'd probably put a Zigbo in, solely off the fact that I don't expect a lot out of Hyde. I don't. I think he's fat, old, and slow. That's just blanket, And so I definitely think that Hyde is going to make the squad. I think he offers some in between the tackle stuff, but not much. And if I had to take Taven off, I'm definitely putting Ozigbo in. Man, Colin Johnson's making it hard, man. Oh man, that sounded funky. Ooh, sorry, let me get that off there. But man, you're making that a hard decision for me saying Colin Johnson because then it becomes the Ozigbo Johnson discussion, and who are you willing to take at that point? That's the hard point for me right there. But back to my defensive lineman. It's we got a Jersey Jaguar appearance. Hey everyone, go check out Jersey Jaguars YouTube account real quick.